So this is my first hour in Silksong, and it's been an interesting experience as someone who played the first game, Hollow Knight. In this hour, I fought 2 bosses, explored chunks of 4 areas, and experienced some of the new mechanics Silksong has to offer. This isn't a full review, just my thoughts and impressions from the first hour. I will be showing and discussing specific areas, enemies, and bosses, so if you haven't played Silksong yet and want to go in blind, this is your spoiler warning. And so, for the rest that is still here, let's dive right in to what Silksong has to offer. The game starts off with Hornet imprisoned by a bunch of veiled bugs. Due to an unknown white butterfly, she was able to escape her captors and explore the land. She later finds out that this land is named Farloom, where a citadel sits up top. Her captors are apparently associated with the citadel, and thus her goal becomes to reach the citadel to figure out why these bugs wanted to bring her here. It's a nice premise, nothing crazy, but introduces us to the world and gives our protagonist a lore reason why she would want to explore and progress in Farloom. We take full control of Hornet the moment she escapes her captors and explore the first area of the game, the Moss Grotto. Aesthetics-wise, you will immediately see the beauty of this area. With lush greens and detailed backgrounds, the music is calming and encourages wonder. Gameplay-wise, this is a fairly simple area with slow-moving enemies, simple platforming, and no real branching paths, outside of a few slightly hidden parts that you will notice if you are observant. As a tutorial area, it does exactly what it needs to. If you have played the previous Hollow Knight, Hornet should control fairly similarly to our Knight at this point of the game, with a few differences. First, you will quickly notice that Hornet's pogo is different, attacking in a diagonal angle instead of directly below. It feels odd at first, and definitely takes some getting used to. However, due to the increased difficulty of pogoing, I have found much more satisfaction when I manage to pull off multiple pogos at a time. Another unique mechanic of Hornet is her silk bind. This is not too dissimilar to Hollow Knight's soul, but there's a bit of difference. You will not be able to heal at all until you fill up her entire silk bar. In exchange, her silk bind heals 3 masks instead of 1. You can also use it in mid-air, and you don't have to hold the button. It's a simple click and the full animation will play. The downside is that this animation is fairly long. If you get hit, the heal is cancelled, the silk is gone, and you'll need to refill the bar again. This means you have to make sure you heal at an opportune moment, otherwise the game will punish you for it. At the end of the Moss Grotto lies the first boss, the Moss Mother. Since this is a tutorial boss, it is quite basic and something most players will do on their first try. It does a single forward charge as an attack that you can jump over or pogo to avoid damage. It also slams into a ceiling, causing rocks and or moss enemies to fall through. Another attack that is easily dodgeable by noticing the light shafts that indicate where an obstacle will fall. The boss also does not have a large HP pool, so in a few hits, you will triumph over this boss. After this, we finally reach the hub area, the Bone Bottom. Similar to Dirtmouth in Hollow Knight, this hub features a bunch of NPCs and shops, a few of which will probably be added as you progress through the game. After this, we move on into the next area. On the way, we will encounter a cute bug named Sherma. I do not know how significant she will be, but I'm sure we'll run into her again. Team Cherry, please don't kill her off like the miner girl. A bit of side note, a few interesting things I found from interacting at the NPCs at Bone Bottom and Sherma. First, Hornet has her own dialogue unlike our previous protagonist. This makes sense considering she is not hollow and thus has her own personality. I think her dialogue would do well to establish her more as a character, so I'm looking forward to that. Second, the setting seems a bit interesting, that the bugs in Farloom seem to be worshipping something at the Citadel. Their culture is big on fate, and they embark on pilgrimages to reach the Citadel. That previous NPC as well, Sherma, was stuck in front of a bone gate that cannot be opened from that side. Instead of finding a way to open it, she just sang, believing that her hymn will open the doors through her fate. It's not a huge deal, but it stood out to me, how their fate can sometimes act like shackles, keeping them from acting, instead of empowering them to solve their problems. Moving on, the next area is the Marrow. In contrast to the green lush moss grotto, the Marrow is an underground cave with lava prominent at the bottom layer. The enemies here are mostly similar to those in Moss Grotto, with the addition of a larger ground enemy you can potentially practice pogos on. In terms of level design, this is where the game starts to loosen up. The player is offered more freedom on where to go, having what feels like at least 2 possible paths at any given point. I personally have a terrible sense of direction, so I actually got a bit lost here at times, in terms of finding the next point of progression. The area also adds a bit more platforming challenge, with new platforms that temporarily break a second after you step foot in them, forcing you to be quicker in platforming. We also meet another new NPC in this area, a warrior named Chakra. She will be our map maker in this game. This is a good time to introduce her, as the increased level complexity definitely calls for a map. Shortly after, we will encounter a big bug bound by silk that we cannot break at the moment. This is something to keep in mind for later. Moving on, we enter an area called Moss Home. This is technically a separate area from the Marrow, but I treat them as one combined package, considering that their progression paths are linked as if they are a single area. Moss Home has a similar vibe with Moss Grotto, with all the greens, but just slightly darker. This area notably introduces a new enemy as well, a snail that throws ranged mouse projectiles at you. This enemy introduces range pressure with one of the first encounters placed in a way which teaches you to attack the projectiles or time your jump so you don't get hit. In addition, a variation of a small ground enemy is also here that quickly lunges towards you. This can catch you if you are just mindlessly attacking the enemies. This area is actually situated at the top of Bone Bottom, something you will realize once you use an elevator and find yourself at the bench of our hub. It's nothing crazy, but it's a bit of cool level design. And since we are scaling Farloom to get to the Citadel, I won't be surprised if they introduce a few more of these shortcuts that lead to earlier areas at the lower levels. Once you progress enough in Moss Home, you will finally obtain the first power-up in this game, the Silk Spear, a simple attack that thrusts the nail forward. It's a good range option if you do not need the Silk Bind heal, but more importantly, this allows us to break the silk in the environment which block our path. We can then go back to our previously trapped big friend and free it from its bindings. When you do, you will figure out this is the next boss, the Bell Beast. This boss is a notable jump in difficulty compared to the Moss Mother. It frequently burrows into the ground, only emerging to attack. This makes its attack windows smaller, forcing you to pay more attention to its patterns so that you can anticipate and punish accordingly. Once enough damage is dealt, it enters a second phase where bells start raining on the ceiling. They're tricky to avoid because of their numbers and somewhat unpredictable bounces. They also deal 2 masks of damage instead of 1, making the punishment much harder. Afterwards, the fight continues as before, but with the added threat of a bell dropping after every attack, until you deal the finishing blow. This boss took me until the 3rd try to beat, but after a well-earned battle, the game rewards us with the Silk Heart. Now, I am honestly unsure what this does exactly. The description says it's power to regenerate silk within one shell. I can only speculate that it either speeds up silk regeneration or increases the base silk so that you do not start with 0 silk bar after each shield. Another thing that this boss rewards us with is a method of transportation by riding this fellow back to the hub. The Bell Beast is the equivalent of Stag Beetle in Silksong. Funny thing actually, the first time I saw this beast, I immediately assumed that it was the Stag Beetle of this game. I was then caught off guard when we freed it and it turned out to be a boss. So then I thought, that was it, we beat it and then move on. But it turned out this beast really was the Stag Beetle in Silksong. I just found it a little funny. In any case, this wraps up my first hour in Silksong. It was really fun playing with Hornet, getting used to her pogos. The setup is good. I find Farloom fairly interesting, with its more focus on fate, wishes, and those other holy religious type of vibes. It's also already looking like Silksong will have a higher, sharper difficulty curve. Maybe a higher difficulty ceiling compared to Hollow Knight, so I'm looking forward to see what else this game will throw at me. On a side note, I'm playing on the launch version of Silksong. Team Cherry has already released some balanced patches according to player feedback, but I will not be updating to these patches, as I personally want to experience the game as close to the original state as possible, difficulty and all. So if the areas and bosses later really are that tough, you'll get to watch me bash my head against them. If you're still here, thank you for watching. I hope this video has been able to provide some value, or at least entertainment to you. And if you enjoyed this, I will be making more as I go through all stages of the game, so I'll be hoping to see you next time.